The EU is to review its ties with Israel, citing the untenable situation in Gaza. The bloc's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, said Brussels was acting after a strong majority of its 27 member states backed a move to assess whether Israel is in breach of human rights obligations in the EU-Israel Association Agreement. The Netherlands spearheaded the latest push over a year after Ireland, together with Spain, failed to convince the bloc to suspend the accord. In a separate move, the UK has suspended trade negotiations with Israel. Earlier, the UN warned that 14,000 babies could die in Gaza within 48 hours if vital aid wasn't delivered.
Casualties poured into Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis again, a day after Israel ordered an evacuation of the area ahead of what it called an unprecedented offensive. This man said 4 children and their parents were killed when a missile hit their tent for displaced people near a soup kitchen. Another family was wiped out in Gaza City, where a strike that Israel said targeted militants hit a school turned shelter. And Gaza's civil defence said there were more fatalities in Deir el-Balah and Nuseirat. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the bombing of children utterly intolerable, as his Foreign Secretary announced the suspension of negotiations with Israel on a new trade agreement.
Blocking aid, expanding the war, dismissing the concerns of your friends and partners, this is indefensible and it must stop.
The EU Foreign Affairs Council voted to assess whether Israel is in breach of Article 2 of its agreement with the EU, which addresses human rights obligations.
There is a strong majority in favour of review of Article 2 of our association agreement with Israel.
Ireland has been calling for the review since 2024, and Taoiseach Simon Harris welcomed the news.
We finally have the potential spectre of actually trade action, trade sanctions being taken at a European level. So this is a very significant moment. I really expect now the European Union, the European Commission, to act with speed on what is now a clear wish of the majority of member states of the European Union.
Palestinians fleeing the evacuation orders don't know what awaits them at their next stop. We are slowly dying every day. It has been 2 years of war, hunger, killing, destruction and displacement, said this woman. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu allowed limited aid to enter Gaza for the first time in 11 weeks yesterday. He said to retain support of its allies for the war. But the United Nations humanitarian chief, Tom Fletcher, said it hasn't been delivered.
This is baby food, baby nutrition. There are 14,000 babies that will die in the next 48 hours unless we can reach them.
An additional 100 trucks approved for entry today will also be delayed, as currently it has to go to distribution centres controlled by the Israeli military.
The solution is easy. Just open the crossings and believe in the humanitarian actors in Gaza.
But there's no sign of that happening as supplies run desperately low. Fergal Gallagher, RTE News.
Let's have a word now with our Europe editor, Tony Connolly, who joins us from Brussels. Tony, your assessment of the pressure now building on Israel, dare we say that there's a momentum building?
Certainly at EU level now, there's a clear swing in favour of a much more robust response to what's been happening in Gaza. This initiative last year, as Fergal mentioned there, by Ireland and Spain, where the then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and Pedro Sanchez wrote to Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, to say, look, the EU has to review its relationship with Israel. Israel could be in breach of Article 2 of that association agreement, which binds both sides to human rights clauses and international law. There was actually no response to that letter. Now, that particular initiative essentially ran into opposition among member states. There simply were too many countries supporting Israel to go into the idea of holding Israel to account over Article 2. And now this time around, obviously, things in Gaza are an awful lot worse. They were pretty bad then, obviously, but they were an awful lot worse in recent weeks. The Dutch foreign minister, who leads a government that has always supported Israel, wrote to Kaja Kallas, the High Representative, to say, look, we have to go back to this idea of reviewing trade relationships with Israel. He wrote to Kaja Kallas directly. Now, she took a consensus vote this evening, and there was a clear majority, 17 countries in favour of moving on this trade-related issue, 9 countries against. So there will be a procedure now where the EU institutions will look at whether or not Israel is in breach. The consensus privately among most member states is that Israel is in breach, and then it'll come to the question of whether they will issue trade sanctions. The Swedish foreign minister today said there should be sanctions against Israeli ministers. So things are moving quite quickly, and that is in concert with the moves as well in the UK. Tony in Brussels, thank you.
Returning to the latest humanitarian situation in Gaza, I've been speaking to James Elder, UNICEF's global spokesperson. I first asked him for an update on what aid is getting into the enclave.
At the moment, it's a trickle. Look, we welcome every truck, every pallet. Let's be very clear. But at the same point, this is not a solution right now. During the ceasefire, which changed the game, where UNICEF was halving the malnutrition, reaching huge numbers of people, that's when you make that difference. That was 500 trucks a day. Right now we're looking at, 10, 20. The target is 100. It's not enough. There is enough food, David, to feed 1 million people for 4 months sitting at the borders. But this is where we are after 75, 80 days of a blockade. It's a starting point. It has to be more than optics. It has to be sustained. It has to be hundreds of trucks. And David, it's got to be met with a ceasefire. It's got to be met with stopping of the bombardments. We've seen almost 1,000 girls and boys killed in just the last 2 months.
OK. There was a very stark message from Tom Fletcher, the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator. This morning he spoke about the potential for up to 14,000 babies in Gaza dying within the next couple of days if food doesn't get in. I suppose the important point isn't the exact number, it's the fact that there are children facing starvation.
Yeah, it really is the point. And there are children who have starved in Gaza, and we're talking not about children who are a long way away from help. We're talking about children who are bordering a country, where people are eating in nice restaurants. We're talking about all the aid those children need at a border. We can save these children if Israel allows us to do it. This is what UNICEF has been doing time and again from north to south of the Gaza Strip. We know exactly what to do. But when we are denied that access at a scale, which is what's been happening, David, then starvation, I'm sorry, it's the cruelest thing you'll ever see. A child's body starts to eat itself. First the fat, then the muscle, and these horrible screams are met suddenly with silence as that body gives up. This has been a reality. This is utterly man-made.
Now, Benjamin Netanyahu specifically referenced international pressure when he said that some aid, limited aid, would be allowed in. And it does appear that the international pressure is ramping up. We had that statement from Britain, Canada and France yesterday. Britain now talking about trade sanctions. There's the potential for European sanctions as well. Is that going to make a difference?
We hope so, David, we hope so. And certainly if you talk to anyone in Gaza, as I do almost every single day, this is what they hope. For far too long, a blockade, a bombing, 20 months, it has been at very grave risk of being normalised, these horrors being normalised. But when you talk to a mum who is literally, David, as I do, no longer eating because she's giving her children the food that she would otherwise have, or she talks about she has only got enough money to buy a part of a vegetable, then we've always known international pressure from those with leverage is the one thing that can stop massacre day after day, a blockade where children are going to die of starvation or disease. So, yeah, many may say it's overdue. For those in Gaza who literally will say, we are holding on, we are surviving, this is very good news.
OK, finally, James Elder, the Israeli government says the reason it's acting the way it is because Hamas is hijacking food shipments that do go in. What do you say to those claims?
Look, it's really important, David. It's a really important question. There's no evidence, right? Most simply, it's false. UNICEF, as a very, very big operator, we go what's called the last mile. So, food from UNICEF goes to the mouth of a child. Vaccines we put into a child's arm. We're very, very good at getting clearance, of getting delivery, of going straight to the beneficiaries who are needed. And I guess the very frustrating thing for someone who's been in Gaza for 4 or 5 times in the last 18 months, David, and has been constantly refuting claims like this, which are then used to deny aid for girls and boys is a very simple way around this. There's a very simple way to show the truth and probably to stop some of the atrocities, and that is to let international journalists into Gaza, to join the very brave Palestinian journalists. We must ask ourselves, why for 20 months have international correspondents been banned from telling the truth from inside Gaza?
James Elders, Global Spokesperson for UNICEF, thank you for joining us on 6-1.